Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. Episode 42 is brought to you by our incredible local friends in Waggle Golf, 9 Mile Brewing, and the officially unofficial craft beer of the Minnesota Wild, Barrel Theory Beer Company. With me as always, Joe Smith of The Athletic, bringing you all the insider info on your Minnesota Wild and Gopher hockey. There's weirdly a lot going on right now, Joe. It's like we're sitting and waiting on like official word of who makes the World Junior teams. We're on the precipice of Four Nations rosters being dropped. And I mean, some of that's going to be handled before people maybe even listen to this episode as it drops the morning of. And the Wild are somehow like the topic of conversation. It's just like, this is a weird state of existence for a lot of us, I think, right now.
Well, I mean, just Minnesota in general, the Vikings are right up there, one of the best teams in the NFL. You have the Wild, best points percentage in the NHL leading up till today when we recorded this podcast. A lot of things that are going on that's really exciting in the world of sports in this state and overall, and a lot of intersections there with Wild prospects that'll be part of World Juniors, and we'll get to that as well. And so in Four Nations, there'll be a number of Wild players on the Four Junior roster, both for Sweden and for USA and everything else. So, yeah, it's a bit crazy time, but it's a fun time right before the holidays, and still a lot of hockey to be played before then. But who would have thought at this point in the year the Wild would be points percentage top in the league? I mean, it's one thing to be at the first 2-3 weeks of the season, get off to a hot start, but we're talking, getting in almost 3 months into the season, or getting 2.5 months into the season where they are.
Yeah. And it's funny because you brought up the Vikings there, and it like hasn't really set in with me that the Lions, who have been dominating the NFL, like they've kind of unanimously been the best team in the league. They are far from having it locked up with the Vikings and the Packers right behind them. They got the Packers coming up here this week, I think. And like that game right there could determine a lot of how this all unfolds. And it just like didn't even click to me. I'm just like, oh yeah, Lions got this in the bag. And it's like, oh no, they don't quite, but we're shifting things a little bit here today, and we're actually going to start with the hot take segment. But this, I don't know if this is a hot take. This is more just an observation that you can tell me, I guess, if it is or isn't a hot take before we spin into that. The way that I look at the Lions weirdly kind of translates pretty well over to the Wild. Just being that people on the outside didn't really have the same faith and belief in, for the Lions, the head coach and the quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. People thought that the coach was just kind of a gimmick. I don't even know what the proper phrasing is for it, but he's just out there and he does things in a very different and emotional way. People thought Jared Goff was cooked when he got booted out of LA, and they just kind of didn't care about the outside noise. They did what they thought was right, and it's absolutely paying off. And you see all of the keyboard warriors out there, the wonderful people of Twitter who criticize pretty much any move that Guerin makes. He doesn't give a shit about the outside noise. And you kind of have mentioned it a couple times. They didn't make any big changes this year, and here they are doing the same thing, taking the league by storm. And it's just got an eerily similar feel to it. I don't know. Grade it. Is that like fair? Is that a little over the top?
I mean, I think it's a little off in the sense that the Lions were in the NFC title game last year. I mean, maybe Lions a couple years ago.
Maybe this is Lions last year. Fair.
Yeah, like the Lions last year were they had the bleed up big and they should have won that and gone to the Super Bowl. Difference versus a team that hadn't won first round series in a while. But I will get the fact that a year and a half ago, people probably wouldn't have thought the Lions would be getting that far, and who knows where the Wild go this season. But what strikes me about the Lions is Campbell is such a culture building, like a kind of go with the gut, just kind of, the position, like he's a really great people, kind of organizer and builder, and they obviously have talent around across the board, but wanted to build a culture where guys can play to their strengths. And I think, Bill Guerin is kind of the go by the gut kind of GM. And while they didn't make changes going into this year, a lot of the reason for their success is that they didn't make changes and trade some guys maybe, and I think we wrote a lot of times last year, Mike Russo and I, about kind of hamstringing their chances at the deadline last spring by signing these guys to long-term extensions. And you can still argue whether some are a little too rich as far as the cap number in years for some of the veteran players, but he went with the roster and the core that he has, and he doubled down on them. And our whole thing was it's time for them to reward his faith and his patience and his persistence in it. And if this is any indication of what it might look like, then it'll look really good for Bill Guerin and company, right? So I think you rarely see the Wild play this connected together on the ice. You have a lot of talent there, but they feel like they're playing in sync. Defensively, they're playing much better hockey. The penalty kill still has problems, right? That's something that's been going on for years, but it feels like they've bought into John Hines' philosophy and in that, and everything that makes the world go round is great goaltending. And when you have Gustafsson and Fleury, I think is undefeated still, or at least and in regulation, that just cures a lot of the world's ills and makes you a lot better coach, a lot better team. So I think a lot of that combined kind of shows you where they are. But again, you don't want to go too crazy, but it's still, this is a couple months into the season. So this is not just a flash in the pan couple of weeks. Like the way they're winning is not by having this outrageous shooting percentage, right? Or having guys play over their heads necessarily, so they have guys that are playing to their level, and Gustafsson has played at this level a couple of years before. So, it's not out of the stretch of imagination for them to be a top 3 team in this division by the end of the year.
No, for sure. I agree. And so I'll take like a B minus C plus grade on my take. I'm okay with that. Barrel Theory Beer Company brings you every week Keyboard Warriors, our NHL and really any topic hot take segment. And we've got a lot of home games here in December. Get out, whether it's for the pregame or postgame, check out the tap room. They have some incredible beers on tap, awesome to-go options, and most importantly, check them out when you're at the game at the XL Energy Center. Get the Crowler of the Day in section 105, or hit up any of their options on really any level, I guess, for Raindrops on Tap. Delicious, delicious offerings. First one I have here, Joe, and we can be a little briefer on this. I'm just curious where your head's at on it, because this is the one that I kind of thought of mid-episode last week, and I know we were running short on time, so I left it out. But I'm maybe an early overreaction, but I really think that Macklin Celebrini is going to make a push to have a better career than Connor Bedard.
Well, that's much better taking your last one, quite frankly. And this is like, I think Bedard's going to have a fabulous career, right?
Yeah.
But getting a chance to get up close with Celebrini in the Frozen Four last year and seeing the start to his season, and he's just such a well-rounded player, right? Like I'm not saying he's like Kaprizov, there's only one Kaprizov, but like he's so tenacious in the forecheck, he's so hard to get off the puck, and he's demanding. He demands a lot from himself defensively, and so I can see him having a better two-way game in my mind than Connor Bedard. Like Bedard has an elite level shot that's very few people have, and so he's not going to maybe have that. But there's no question, from the skill set to like the hockey brain that he has, to his pedigree of being around elite level athletes his whole life and led by his dad who worked for the Golden State Warriors. Like, I mean, it would not shock me if he ends up having a better career than Bedard. So that means the two of them could be the next wave of the Crosby and Ovechkin, right? Kind of the next future face beyond past the Connor McDavids of the, hockey is in a great place if you have the likes of McDavid and Matthews, and right behind them, Bedard and Celebrini too.
No, I agree. And I actually really like what you said. I wish you would have doubled down harder on it. I see it's early, but like there's definitely similarities to the way Kaprizov and Celebrini play. And that's not like copy paste. And that's not saying that Celebrini is going to ascend like Kaprizov has as quickly as he did. You know, age being a factor, the team he's on being a factor, but the balance of the game, the way they see the ice, the way they can set up their teammates, and of course the scoring punch, like I can see that. That one could age pretty well. Next one here, stretch, and I don't think there's any chance it actually happens, but I really think the way he's played of late, Jared Spurgeon has made a case that he should at least be considered for Team Canada for the Four Nations.
I look at their blue line. It looks like it's pretty full right now. I don't have the roster in front of me.
If he was a foot taller, would you?
Well, everybody's a foot taller. If I was a foot taller, I'd be playing at a played college basketball. But no, it's I think Spurgeon is one of those guys that you have to watch every day to appreciate what he does on the ice and in the room too. And you know, I don't know if don't think he'll make the Four Nations roster, but I think that he is a guy that you look at the differences between the Wild this year and last year, and one guy who's been different, or the new addition, quote unquote, has been Jared Spurgeon, who was not really healthy last year, missed the start of the season, injured last game of the preseason. And you saw the ripple effect of what happened without him. And, you know, not the biggest guy, not the youngest guy. He's getting towards the later stages of his career versus the earlier stages, since he started when he was 15 years old, it felt like. But you know, such a calming presence, you know, a guy who can defend for his size, a guy that Lord knows the Wild wanted Cale Addison to follow and follow his footsteps for a number of years there. Sorry, it's your buddy there, but I just think that he made such a huge difference at the Wild this year. Both a calming presence on the ice, and you know, the problem last year was them not being able to handle adversity, or let losing streaks drag, or just kind of felt like there was not something kind of holding them together. You know, and I think having him around, not just hosting guys at Thanksgiving or having the rookies over who guys were in preseason, but just having him, and he's not the loudest guy in the world. I know everyone knows that, but there's something about him that a reason why he's a captain here. And so I think, you know, quietly he's become a pretty key reason for, you know, why the Wild have been off to such a good start.
For sure. Next one here, I know you're going to side with me, but I just got to see how audacious we think this is. Awesome episode from Russo and LaPanta this week, like really going in deep and talking about the Jiricek trade. But LaPanta couldn't help himself. He started the episode basically saying that Thanksgiving food is a joke. No one actually likes it. If they liked turkey and stuffing and gravy, they would have it more than one day a year. And I just can't let that slander stand. I think that is a ridiculously hot take. Granted, I know LaPanta's all about the food and beverage hot takes, and he really doesn't care what any of us think, but I won't allow it. Slander. If I could have that every week, I would just be obese, like morbidly obese. That's the problem. I limit myself to twice a year because we basically do the same thing for Christmas. That's right. But like if I did that regularly, I'm sorry, like I'm 500 pounds.
Yeah. And LaPanta is a guy that usually don't criticize over food choices because they have some Sunday dinners that I'm very jealous of. And I know he probably has a sponsorship with Kowalski Market and the meats there and stuff like that. And so he's mostly going to be touting the, you know, the sirloins, the steaks, or everything like that. But I do have turkey more than once a year. You know, I don't have like the full-fledged bird that you have on Thanksgiving, but I eat turkey a lot, whether it's like turkey sandwiches, turkey this or that. Like I'll have that more often than not. And I'll have mashed potatoes every day if it, you know, that fill me up with that all the time. But yeah, I mean, the Thanksgiving to me is much more than the food. Like obviously the food is great. Everything like that is getting the family together and being grateful for what we have and watching football. And it's just one of the things that kind of brings people together, which I'm sure does the LaPanta household. But yeah, I would be way against that take of that Thanksgiving's overrated because it's such a cool day.
To be clear, Thanksgiving food, not
yeah.
the
Sorry, Thanksgiving food. Yeah,
yeah.
Food.
I don't want to be putting that on LaPanta. Maybe he thinks the day is overrated too, but he didn't say that, so I won't place that at his feet.
Yeah, I mean Thanksgiving food. I mean,
yeah,
it takes watching my wife go to the kitchen for 2 days straight. It takes a lot to put that kind of stuff together. So there's a reason why it's not more than multiple days a year, I guess, to have that kind of spread. So, but I do like all those little things individually. I'll have stuffing individually. I'll have turkey individually. I'll have everything else. So sign me up.
Yep. With you. All right. This next one, I'm really curious to see your opinion on. So the new show over on Daily Faceoff, the sheets. If you look up Jeff Marek, you're going to find it. His episode this week, he talks about a comment that came from Colby Cohen where he says, officials have been consistent with this call all season so far, referring to goaltender interference. I think outside of offsides, it's the call officials get correct the most. And Jeff Marek doubles down on it and says, I chuckle every time I see someone on television during one of these situations who throws his hands up in the air and proudly announces their own ignorance, saying, I don't even know what goalie interference is anymore. Basically to say goalie interference is very clear, black and white, and everyone knows what it means. What do you think, Joe?
I think that's bullshit. Like, and it's not just because I've heard John Cooper say that a million times. I don't know what goalie interference is. Ask any NHL coach in the league what they think about goalie interference. And I get why the rule is there, and I get the idea behind the rule. Mm-hmm. It just, the game is so fast and things in that area get so bunched up, and it just not really consistently called. And that's probably because of human error or different people making the call in different games. But I don't think I've ever seen it consistently called. If it were consistently called one way or the other, then whatever the rule is, I get it. But it just feels like game to game, it kind of goes back and forth. So that's my issue of goalie interference, beyond the fact that of it actually being a rule or whatever. I just don't think it's consistent enough.
Yeah, and I had to throw this in because it's the first time I think I've ever had like a full head turn moment from Jeff Marek. Like, I'm a Marek disciple. He's got some exotic and unique takes for sure. This is the first one where I stopped. I was like, I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
All right. Last one here, just because I had to throw this in because I know we both really care about this guy. I think the greatest press conference we've gotten and will get this year in hockey is Marty St. Louis 4 or 5 times consecutively answering completely different questions, just saying, I loved our game, but I'm not going to talk about the refs.
Did he say it in French too?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. I love that he does it in both languages too. And
well, he answers French questions in French and answers English questions in English.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, in a media market like that, you have to be consistent in both languages, right? You don't want to give one group of press a different answer. But yeah, that's his personality completely. Having covered him in Tampa, so it's not a very exciting press conference for writers, although it could be kind of construed that way because of the fact that what he did and what he said, what it stood for. But hey, I think people would have loved to hear him go off and rip the refs and stuff like that. But I think he's a little more calculated and calmer than that in these days. Maybe when he's a player, did a little differently, but now I think he gets it.
Yeah, he's on my personal Mount Rushmore of like favorite hockey players, but this to me is like better than the Marshawn Lynch, like replying to everything. I'm just here so I don't get fined. Like, he's basically saying like, yeah, I thought we played great. And I'm not going to talk about the refs, which is really to say the refs absolutely sucked. It's great. I love it. All right. Well, everyone, again, get out, support our friends at Barrel Theory in Taproom or at the X when you're viewing one of the many Wild games at home this month. Joe, let's just continue with the chaos, and we're going to kick it right over to an interview we recorded on Monday with one Chris Johnston. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it, that makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is NHL Insider, who you can check out with The Athletic, TSN, and SDPN. Chris Johnston. Chris, appreciate you jumping on with us.
Good to be here, guys. How are you?
Good. And I usually have a longer intro because we usually find a way to tie in the Minnesota connection for our guests. I think you're the second one that I really don't have any kind of Minnesota tie-in for. Do you have any memorable experiences in Minnesota? Or have you spent any extended time here?
Yeah, the most memorable is maybe not a great one, but years ago I was covering the Leafs for a game in Minnesota. It was on New Year's Eve, and someone stole my jacket out of the media room.
Oh,
so
wow.
My most memorable, and we were going to Winnipeg next. So my most memorable visit to Minnesota was being jacketless in early January between Minnesota and Winnipeg. And we got to Winnipeg on January 1st. And of course, all the stores were closed. So I just was grinning and bearing it. But I've also had some great visits to Minneapolis and to St. Paul as well, too. So it's not all bad.
Well, I know you came in the summertime, which is the best time to come, I think, with your girlfriend, right? And to watch some Jays Twins games, I think, recently.
Yeah,
last summer. It
was in May a couple years ago. We came and caught a Jays game. We stayed in Minneapolis. Obviously covering the NHL most of the time. I spent my time in St. Paul, but we had a great trip there and enjoyed some nice runs along the water. And so it's not all bad memories, but that one does stick out. That time someone stole my jacket in the middle of winter.
Did Russo or Sickman find out who stole the jacket, or was it's always a mystery that hasn't been discovered yet? I guess.
It was never solved. It's one of those unsolved. I should have got Inspector Russo on it. I don't even know if I told him about it at the time, but if anyone could have cracked the code, probably would have been him.
Who steals a jacket in the middle of the winter? Come on now, just do it.
I mean,
lost their jacket.
I should say, I don't know. Someone might have thought it was their own and taken it by accident. It's possible it wasn't stolen. All I know is my jacket was no longer there, and I didn't have one to wear when I left the rink.
Well, as you can see, our podcast is called Fellowship of the Rink, stick tap to Lord of the Rings kind of fandom for us. Are you a Lord of the Rings fan, or is there any kind of nerd itch that you have to scratch every once in a while? Book series, movie series, something like that. That's kind of your thing.
I'm not really that nerdy, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, I'm certainly not cool either. So I exist somewhere in the middle. But as a kid, I was big time into sports, as a fan and played sports. And even now, most of my downtime, I like watching the NFL or, golf when it's the PGA Tour season or things like that. So my brother was into all the more nerdy things. He had a huge comic book collection. I think he still got it somewhere. And all his kids are into that stuff. But for whatever reason, I just never watched a lot of movies or anything like that. So I've got no animus for Lord of the Rings, but I don't know a whole lot about it either. I've never seen any of the movies.
What's the last movie you watched?
Ooh, I watched a cheesy Christmas movie yesterday. So bad. I think it was called it was actually kind of funny. Bad Moms something Christmas. It was actually
Mila Kunis, I think, in it.
Yeah, there's some off-color jokes in there. It wasn't your typical run-of-the-mill feel good one, but it was on at my in-laws' place, and it was actually really good. We were laughing.
Well, I know your passion for running, so I wasn't sure what your consecutive days running streak is at right now. Which is even more.
I'm approaching 1,700 days. I don't know the exact number, but I'm in the 1,600s now, and hoping to keep it going to next fall where I can get to 2,000 days. That seems like that's like the next major milestone in my head.
It's kind of a Cal Ripken streak for runners or people who live in Toronto or north of the border. It's a pretty good streak, especially, people who.
Yeah, and because I do it mostly outside. That's 99% of days completed outdoors. Every once in a while, if I'm in a travel situation, I'll go on a treadmill at a hotel or something just because I might not know where I am or what have you. But for the most part, I like to run outside even in wintertime.
For sure. Well, let's talk here then, Chris. National view of the Minnesota Wild, Bill Guerin, like everything that's going on right now. And I know people like Pete Blackburn have, certainly made it known that the Wild have historically been viewed as boring. And the sports books say 22-1 still, even though they're leading the league. What is the view widely outside of Minnesota on Guerin's work and the Wild?
Well, I mean, it's hard not to be impressed with it. I mean, at a certain point, we're beyond the early stages of the season, right? If it's after 2 weeks, you might react about a team, but at that point, there's still a lot more to be proven. Obviously they haven't accomplished anything yet, but it certainly hasn't escaped the notice of the national gaze. I don't think, how strongly Minnesota started, how consistently they've performed. And, they may have been boring once upon a time in the outsider's view, but I think ever since Kaprizov showed up, which obviously is a number of seasons now, they get a little bit more love nationally. I think he gets some attention. He's obviously produced a lot of highlight reel type of plays and things. So, maybe that from the Jacques Lemaire days, it's sort of you earn a reputation and it can be hard to erase it even once you've outgrown it. But I do think the Wild have outgrown it. And they've been really one of the most positive stories of the year so far, because while I wasn't down on the team, I certainly didn't peg this kind of start and to see them, right up at the top of the standings.
And you look, Chris, other than the fact that I went on paternity leave, which is a big reason why that they're doing well. They don't have a lot of changes to the roster going into the season, right? Like Jacob Loaka was brought it in. Obviously, they were healthy going into the season with Spurgeon coming back, but there wasn't a lot of wholesale changes. Hines is still the coach that you're in their system, but just can you sense from watching a little bit what been a little bit difference maker in your eyes from afar?
That's a little tougher for me to put a finger on it. I will say though, I think it speaks to where the league is in a lot of ways. I mean, it just seems like there's not a huge separation between teams like there once was. And I don't know if that's the sort of obsessive chase of parity league wide that the league wants. It almost pulls everyone more into a middle versus having a lot of teams at the bottom. I mean, we certainly do have a couple teams at the bottom that I'm pretty confident are going to remain there, but for the most part, there's not a huge gap. And so things like health, getting some better goaltending, all those little factors I think can stack up. But, the Wild were, at least before they made the coaching change last November, I mean, they've been a pretty good team for a period of time, I'd say. I mean, I know it was a rough start to last season and that resulted in the Dean Evason firing, but all things being equal, they've been certainly above average team or above the middle line. And you're seeing the best of it right now. And certainly doesn't hurt rather to have some elite performers, even a second year of Brock Faber. I mean, the amount of minutes he can play. I mean, I think those things, small steps in his game, even though, it's the same player, but he's not the exact same because, he's gained more experience and is finding his footing even more in the league. And I think that's helped push the team forward as well.
Obviously, the big move over the weekend, Jiricek, a very high rated prospect with Columbus Blue Jackets, number 6 overall pick just a few years ago. A little bit on the outs there from what we gather is skating was an issue with him. But what's the overall rate on him as a player and prospect and what his upside is? And what do you make of kind of how much the Wild gave up in that particular deal?
Well, the upside's massive, right? I mean, that explains what they paid, all those draft picks, as well as Damon Hunt. And, when you have a 6'4" defenseman who's just turned 21 here in the last couple of days, shoots right. I mean, those kind of players in the NHL, they're not very plentiful. And the ones that are, make a lot of money usually. So, I think whether or not he can become, what made him a 6 overall pick a couple of years ago, that's the to be determined part. And, but I can see why the Wild were so, keen to get him, because this is a weird trade. I mean, think about it. Columbus is still in a rebuilding process. This is a player they've taken who obviously they feel they know what he is. That clearly, if they're trading him, I think it's implied that they don't believe he's going to become a difference maker as an NHL player, or else why trade him? But there's still a lot of time for him to have a say in that, and for the development team with the Wild to work with him and to get him under his feet. I mean, it has to be said, he didn't have a very stable, beginning of his NHL career. The Blue Jackets have changed management. They've changed the coaching staff a couple different times. Before his 21st birthday, he's played for multiple coaches. When he has played, he was in and out of the lineup, up and down with the American Hockey League. I mean, I think a little bit of stability and will do him well in terms of seeing, can he reach that ceiling? Can he push beyond it? But this sort of trade, I'm struggling to think of one in modern times where we've had this, where it's just this early in a top prospects cycle, where the team that's trading away for draft picks is still in a rebuild, and it's a team, in this case, at the top of the standings, that's getting them with a long-term view in mind. I mean, basically all the assumptions that are usually built into NHL trades were thrown out the window on this one. And I think it's a bold play for the Wild. If they can turn him into something, I mean, we're going to look back on this, even with all those draft picks, and say, what a home run to get that guy before he'd even really established himself as an NHL player.
And people ask me too, like, how that's a lot to give up. And I tell them, first of all, they hope that conditional first rounders, like in the mid-20s, right? If the season goes the way they want it to go. And they've drafted probably more players in the last 4 or 5 years than most teams have. They haven't really traded a lot of their picks. And some of the prospects are coming and going to be playing in the NHL, they hope. And I guess the big crystal ball is to have the, Brodin, Faber, Middleton, Spurgeon, Byam, and Jiricek. That's a pretty good 6 right there, going forward for a while. So I guess if you look at that way, if you build your team from the goaltending and defense out, I guess that's kind of one strategy to look at it if this guy does turn out.
Right. And some people do have those pick valuation models where basically every pick has an expected value that you can put a number to. And, to simplify it down, essentially, if you add up the expected value of those picks, it's roughly a 6th overall pick. I think that informed a lot of the discussions in terms of arriving at that final trade price. And so, really what you've done is you've given up quantity in terms of number of picks for quality. And, a lot of this will now hinge on whether Jiricek becomes the kind of NHL player that obviously Minnesota thinks he can. If he does, I'm pretty confident in saying they're probably going to win the trade. Now it's going to take us 20 years to figure this out. I mean, that 27 second rounder, that kid's still like a freshman in high school or something right now. So it might be a long way being able to until they're doing the trade tree on this one, it's going to be a long way in the future. But I think if Jiricek becomes a regular NHL player, a contributor, someone maybe eventually is on their second pairing, that's a pretty, you'd make that trade. It's just, this is the unknown. You're dealing with human beings. There's aspects that no one can know for sure, but I admire how bold they were. And I think it is interesting that one of the better teams in the league was the one pulling the trigger here. I mean, it tells you a lot of what the organization thinks of this player. And, draft picks aren't worth much. You want players, you want people to make a difference. And, this guy's up with the NHL team now. I know he's not going to play tomorrow, but he's someone that's going to play games for them soon. And you're getting that return now versus waiting, 5 years down the road just to make a selection.
Yeah. And Michael Russo came on with us earlier this year and basically said, with everyone that put the Wild down at like 6 or 7 in the Central in their preseason rankings, the fact that they're doing what they're doing, is there a world where you can argue Kirill Kaprizov out of the Hart Trophy?
Not based on what we've seen so far. No, I mean, the thing is we don't vote on, 25, 30 games segments, but, at this point in time, if we had to vote today, I'm reasonably sure he'd win going away. What a start to the year, what a start to his career. I mean, he's been electric really since he entered the league. And then, the fact that the team has had so much success, I think that it's not driven by him alone, but I mean, those are the kind of factors that usually voters are looking at when they're making that pick. I mean, the Hart Trophy is kind of unusual, for pro sports, just because it's the player adjudged most valuable to his team versus, say, a sort of most outstanding player type of thing. But I do think that he would be the first quarter to third season winner. But a lot's gonna how the season finishes will depend where he gets there. But either way, I think he's going to be in a great position, him and his agent, come this summer when they're eligible to start doing an extension with the Wild.
I mean, what do you make of that? What's the number going to be?
You can't miss the 14 million that Leon Draisaitl put on the table. I mean, whether it ends up a little above that, a little below that, I think it's a magnet. I do think, the other issue we have here, and this doesn't just affect Kaprizov. I mean, someone like Jack Eichel, Connor McDavid, they're also eligible to do extensions this summer. Is, we're going to have a new CBA negotiation starting, and each of those players and their representatives are going to have to decide: do you want to see the resolution first to know exactly what the system looks like? Just in case there could be a change. Who knows? Maybe they come up with a franchise kind of tag in hockey or something where a certain player can make more, or it's not calculated the same way. I mean, I'm not predicting that's going to happen at this point. They haven't even started those discussions, but it's at least a possibility, right? And so, it's not knowing what the next salary cap number is going to be, not knowing what the system's going to look like. It's hard to say with any amount of certainty, but I think Kaprizov 100%, if he had to negotiate tomorrow, they would be looking for that Draisaitl number. And I ultimately think he's going to get something in that range, just because, Craig Leopold's already told the reporters there that, no one's going to outbid them. I think it's pretty evident how important he is to the franchise. It would be devastating to have this kind of season and then have to potentially even risk losing him at this stage. So I think Minnesota is going to step up and sign him, and it's going to be a massive number. And, it should be. That's where his talent level is. And quite honestly, I think we're at the dawning of this age where we're going to see more and more and more players push the envelope at the high end of the league. And guys like McDavid and Eichel may even end up ahead. It just depends on the timing of everything and how the stats fall.
I'll see the Four Nations rosters will be announced this week. There should be, I think we're expecting, a few wild players on Team USA, especially with Faber and Matt Boldy, and you have the Sweden counterparts. I'm sure Gustafsson and Brodin and the like will be on there. You'll be doing a lot of Team Canada, I understand. Just what are your hardest cuts you think for Team Canada, and is Steven Stamkos on this roster?
I don't think he is. I don't have a copy of the roster, so it's more sense than true reporting in this case. But I just think at this stage of his career, it's tough. Stamkos, if you look back at his history, it's a story of bad timing. In 2010, he was maybe a little too young to make the team for the Vancouver Olympics. He obviously got injured in the run up to the Sochi Olympics, so missed that tournament. And then throughout the best years of his career, there was no best on best hockey. I know he did play at the World Cup in 2016, but that wasn't quite the same as getting, a chance to go represent his country at the Olympics. And so I think for those like Stamkos, John Tavares, players of that age, they're all kind of compatriots. It's going to be tough for them to make this team. Sidney Crosby's an outlier, obviously was named among the first 6 players, and it's kind of crazy to say, Sid the Kid's kind of the grandfather of this roster now. He's he's the big brother in the room, and I would expect the captain, but it's going to be a lot of younger guys. And I think the toughest cuts, quite honestly, will probably come at the forward position. Canada has a number of players, especially centers, maybe more than some countries, where they have a debate. How many centers do we bring and move to the wing, out of position? And then, it's more scoring players. Can we, I know Team USA had a similar debate, but are you having this, your fourth line, your 13th forward? What kind of elements, are there guys that can kill penalties? And so I think, there are players like Mark Scheifele, who's had a really nice start in Winnipeg that I think could go either way. It's not saying he's not on the team, but if he wasn't, it's just because he kind of fills an offensive role primarily. And Canada has a lot of offensive players ahead of him. I'll start with McKinnon, Marner, obviously McDavid. You go down the list, you get the cat. Yeah, all these guys are kind of guaranteed to be on the team. And then basically your question is, do we have Mark Scheifele on the fourth line, or do we just maybe have someone who's better adept? Tom Wilson, for example, is a player I know Canada has looked at pretty closely here in the run up to this tournament, who, brings a different element. So, I think the forwards is positions where Canada is the deepest. Goaltending, you need a bottle of liquor and a dartboard to figure out what the best way to go there is. And, I think the blue line is relatively clear cut. Obviously it's never easy. One player that you're leaving off, that the first sort of cut could just as easily be on the team. And I know both the US and Canada were kind of hoping they might up the roster size to 25 players from 23 so that they could bring a couple extra players, as they'll be able to next year at the Olympics. But I think there's going to be some forwards in particular that'll get attention for being the high profile snubs, as we call them in the media.
Well, I know you mentioned one of your little hobbies is watching golf. How is your golf game?
It's not in very good shape, if I'm being honest, but I still love the sport. I've never been that good. There's been times in my life I was sort of regularly shooting in the low to mid 80s, but nowadays, if you and I went out next summer, I'd be happy to break 100. So I don't play a whole lot, but I still love it. I love that it's a thing you can do at all ages. I can still play with my dad, for example, whereas he and I couldn't get on a shinny rink together too much.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Final question, brought to you as always by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order.
3 names, dead or alive, celebrity, athlete, whatever. Who rounds out your dream golf foursome?
Oh, man. It's funny. I'm inclined to say Tiger Woods because was my all-time favorite athlete. But I was just thinking if I actually had to play with him, I would be so scared.
It would be much fun.
So yeah, if I could just be in the foursome but not actually have to hit shots with my ability. But I'll go with my dad. I'll go with Tiger Woods. And who's my fourth? I want to do something, another athlete, maybe. I'll go with, this is really random. I'm going to go with Joe Carter, who had a World Series winning home run for my Toronto Blue Jays as a kid. So it's like two of my athletes that I grew up really loving and cheering for when I was a kid. And then always loved playing around to golf with my dad.
So who's in your card? Is you and your dad, and then other two guys? Are you gonna split it up?
Yeah.
Your dad gets Joe Carter, and you get Tiger, and kind of work it out that way.
Those other guys are probably hitting it into another area code. my dad and I are probably the short hitters in that group, so we'll share the cart together and probably chuckle up the fairway.
Good game of card golf there. Know your partner, right, to play the right place. So
yeah, the problem for my dad is he doesn't miss a fairway. He doesn't hit it long, whereas I don't know which direction it's going. We could be left, we could be right, occasionally down the middle, but we'll have a good ride either way.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris, for joining us. I appreciate it. Look forward to catching up to you once I'm a little back off leave here in a week or two. But yeah, hope you have a great Christmas. If I don't talk to you before then, and hopefully we'll catch up after that.
Right on. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. Again, appreciate CJ being able to jump on with us. Quick note for everyone, too, on Waggle Golf. They actually have a ton of great hockey-specific apparel coming out here this winter. Actually, today, as you listen to this on Wednesday, December 4th, they're dropping their 1980 Miracle Hockey Team collaboration. And they've actually got coming January more of their custom player hats dropping with Brock Faber and Taylor Heisey leading the charge. I don't know if anyone remembers. I think Brock Faber had a golden retriever. Cole Heiserman had the red goal light. Let's see. It was Isaac Howard had the ice cream cone one, which I actually would have bought that if it didn't sell out right away. And there's one more that I just can't remember, but I'm sure it'll be a great spread across the board. Joe, now we got to talk a little bit of Gopher hockey, which it's coming up here. We'll maybe end on this for the Gophers, but we got the rivalry match this week. It's going to be fun. But this weekend that we just passed through, Alaska, yet another of what seems like a big string of series that the Gophers have had to battle through, where you have an older, more physical, disciplined team with goaltending standing on their head. And for 5 periods, the Gophers really didn't have much of an answer for the Canucks. And then somehow 3rd period on Saturday, they absolutely lit up and torched. But the biggest thing for me this weekend, I'm not sure if you were able to catch any of the action, but Oliver Moore's back. He wasn't showing up big on the score sheet, but this was a man possessed, especially in the Saturday game. And Bob Motzko said as much in the postgame presser, basically said everything we did in those first 2 periods was because Ollie basically dragged the team behind him to do so. Cool note though, Leo Gruba got the game winner, and it was his first collegiate goal. So fun for him. And Brody Zemer, I don't know. This is a guy that I knew like had some good potential, had a balanced game, but he's really come on quicker than I expected, and he's played a really big role. And he was out there to punish people this weekend, Joe. Like, we've seen the skill. We saw the Sports Center top 10 play against Wisconsin in that OT winner, but like, he was cleanly headhunting out there. Like, he was going around trying to kill people. And I kind of liked seeing that edge to his game. I don't know. It's been a lighter load from like a pairwise perspective so far. What are you thinking for the Gophers just thus far in the season, heading into now like 2 really big weekends with Michigan and Michigan State coming up?
Well, there's kind of been some of those weekends where they look like the team that should be a Frozen Four contender, and then there's some where they're trying to work their way through things and adjusting to a lot of some new players and new freshmen on their roster. So I think we're not going to really know for sure. We know they're a really good team. We know they're a team that can be a contender, but we'll learn a lot more about them in coming weeks. Michigan State, especially, who's been the best team in the country. I think you learn more about teams like this as the second half of the season rolls around. But I think there's a lot to like about the newcomers that they've had on this roster. Obviously, when you bring in after you have, a fifth-year senior goaltender who's backed you up for so long, all of a sudden you have new guys in net splitting that. It's been a pleasant surprise to see them both stepping in and playing well. So, I mean, I think overall they are what people thought they'd be, and then more so just trying to figure out now, going into some of the meat of the schedule, what that kind of reveals.
For sure. And 2 of the newcomers, and I guess one of them, newcomer just being added to the roster, but we got 3 guys that are at least labeled as camp invitees for World Juniors. And I keep asking people and no one can come up with one for me. I think this is the first time in Gopher hockey history that we have had a Canadian representative for World Junior in Matthew Wood, which is going to be really like weird for me to wrap my head around. But USA attendees, aforementioned Brody Zemer and Oliver Moore. Do you get really into World Juniors, Joe, or is that something that's like not really been as big of a focus with you being a lot more NHL leaning versus prospects, college, whatnot?
Well, like I always, tried to watch the highlights or watch some of the games on TV over Christmas break when I, whether I'm in with the family or not, I tried a little bit. It's not been like, on my bucket list, I'd love to cover like a World Championships kind of thing versus World Juniors. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm more focused on the World Juniors in the respect of the teams that I cover, whether it was Tampa or Minnesota and the players that are involved and what that does for them or how that changes the trajectory for their career. And, so like for my purposes with the Wild, I'm like curious if Riley Heidt makes it, for example, or see if Zeev Vyam, comes in and is dominant as he's been for Denver. There's a bunch of guys that are going to have a chance to be part of it and see how that kind of gives them a springboard for the rest of their season. So yeah, that's kind of how I view it versus like being hyper focused on watching it during the holidays. But yeah, totally. I think it's something that obviously there's a ton of interest in it.
No, for sure. And don't know how much, I mean, obviously with, the kid and trying your best to keep up on the teams you're usually following, have you kept any tabs or followed along with what Michigan's done so far this year?
I haven't followed them as much as I follow usually like the Big Ten, quote unquote, the old CCHA as much as I did in the past. Like I've mostly been focused on, following how the Wild are doing and, and the Gophers. But I think in general, the last couple of years, having lost a lot of really key pieces for their program, having to reload, from the several years back when they had 3 or 4 like top 15 picks. I think it was. So
four of the top 5 in one draft is.
Yeah,
I don't think we're gonna see that anytime soon.
No.
That was nuts.
Absolutely. So haven't followed them as much this year as in previous. I obviously watched the Michigan-Ohio State football game over the weekend, so that was my delving back into the college days, but not quite the hockey so far.
Fair. All right. Well, I was gonna say we should have some kind of like friendly wager on it, but if you don't even know what's going on with them, it feels like I'm just stealing candy from you. So we'll leave that be. Real quick then, before we jump over to the Minnesota Wild, word from one of our partners. Hey, beer lovers, stop into 9 Mile Brewing to check out their seasonal offerings like Mallet Mike's Rye Porter or Two for His Nibs, a barrel-aged Honeybush Vanilla Red Ale. It's a lot of words and might not be for everyone, but I'm telling you, I have had a couple of them that Bob was nice enough to hook me up with, and it is actually really good. If you like stronger, darker beers, it's a 9%er, so it's not like crazy heavy, but it's certainly not a light beer. Recommend it. But these delightful brews do go great with hockey and just the crazy winter weather that's on the horizon. And be sure to check out 9 Mile's events page to see what's coming up this month, like Trivia Mafia, next up being Music Mayhem Trivia, cribbage and crokinole tournaments, and a ton of other activities that you'll want to be on the watch for. Get out to their Bloomington tap room and see what all the hype's about. Joe, are you a music guy? Like, would you do good in music trivia? Because I would be absolutely worthless.
I feel like I love music, and my whole life I have, but there's always that part of the trivia. My wife used to host trivia back in the day in St. Pete. They have that segment where they would play the song and make you say who sung it in the song. Like, I recognize the song and I can repeat the words and like sing this whole thing, but I just like, who sang it and what year? You're like, oh, I have no idea.
Sure.
You know certain ones. I would get, if you had been the arena cam that said finish this song,
finish it, yeah.
Versus like say who sang it and what year it was. I would not.
Yeah, take me back to history class, please. Like,
yeah. I know more movies probably than that, more music, but
yeah, no, movies and TV I would do great at. Music, like, not to the same level as you, because I know you're the karaoke master and you like going to concerts a lot more. I like music. I just like it's far from a priority for me. I'm not one of those people that was crazy and out at like 2 a.m. trying to get the Taylor Swift vinyl from Target. That's still crazy, man. I don't understand. People are nuts. All right. Well, let's wrap here with Minnesota Wild. And I mean, we talked about it a little bit there with CJ, but I mean, this is something that, on this show and on Judd's Buds with Spoke Z, like right away, when we saw some of the moves going in Columbus, we're like, ooh, David Jiricek would be really fun if the Wild went after him. Lo and behold, here we are. What are your just initial thoughts on everything that came to fruition here?
Well, first of all, I'm not surprised necessarily. I think he's the type of guy that the Wild really liked in his draft year. Obviously didn't have the chance to take him, but all the, from Jeff Brackett to the scouts and pro staff really liked him. Anytime you have a guy that's that big as a right shot defenseman, they're hard to come by. And if you can get the right mix of coaching around him and maybe get the skating to what level where it needs to be, where obviously clearly it's been an issue the last couple of years in Columbus, then you can unlock a really rare talent there. So, he's not the splashiest name out there, but the fact that this happened so early and the fact, like Chris Johnston said, like, really, do you have a team who's kind of rebuilding, give up on a guy like this? And really, do you have a team that's number one in the league making a deal like this, right? For a guy who may not necessarily pencil in as your top 4 guy right now. He's still on the team and he'll probably, they want to play slow play with him. He hasn't played a lot of games, a lot of NHL games recently. So they want to have him practice a lot before he plays at the Wild roster. Plus the Wild have been playing really well. So don't want to rush, don't want to break up a good thing, but I think this is a kind of a move for now and the future, and it kind of indicates to me how Bill Guerin feels about this team, in a sense where, you know, the last several years he's been very reticent to give up first round picks or picks in general, picks in general. But I think they've accumulated so many picks over the last 3-4 years. They have prospects that are coming. They've signed a lot of their guys, as we mentioned, to long-term deals. So their roster is pretty full on both ends, I think, both forward and defense. So when you have a chance to get a guy like this who could step in as one of your sixth defensemen for years going forward, it's worth a gamble. And, you know, they were on him for a while. You know, Bill Guerin was with talking with Don Waddell for a while. There were a lot of other suitors for this player. But clearly the Wild went over the edge there with a few more picks, and, you know, they're hoping that conditional first is going to be a mid-20s pick, right? Or they hope it's last pick, 32nd pick, whatever. But I think in general, it's a worthy gamble for the Wild, and it gives them a chance that if he does pan out the way that they think or hope he will, if you have, you know, Faber and Brodin and Middleton, Spurgeon, and Byam and Jiricek, or of some combination of all those, you know, it's a really strong mix there from the blue line on out. And so we'll see how he plays, but I think the fact that they were on him for so long, the fact that, you know, they probably know the deficiencies there and feel that they can improve them. And I think there's a lot to be said for a fresh start for a guy who's had a lot of turmoil and in Columbus since he's been drafted, right? The change of management, changing how many coaches he's had already, or coaches at the NHL level that he hasn't been around yet. So I think a lot can be said for that. So curious to see once he's on the ice, but 6'4" right shot D who have that kind of skill set are not easy to find, draft, or acquire.
No, that is for sure. And from what we're hearing outside the market too, it sounds like we're pretty fortunate that the other teams that were really stepping up, and like one or two that even offered 2 firsts, came down to the fact that they were in division. So glad that we're not with the Blue Jackets. Our I guess I don't know, do we call them brother, sister, cousin of the expansion? But in a vacuum, I love the trade. I think it's incredible value whenever you can compile assets and get, you know, a quote unquote equal return on the scorecard, but get the quality over the quantity. You gotta do it. And, you know, I gave LaPanta a hard time earlier in the hot take segment. He did ask one really good question though, on their episode, where does this put the Wild in a weird spot now where they really aren't going to have much of an opportunity to be buyers at the trade deadline should they choose to?
Well, they won't have this year's first to give up, right? So that takes part of it out. You know, they do have other picks. They could, I think that one of the picks was 2027, right? Picks they traded in this deal.
Yeah, the second, which, I mean, Judd Brackett slays the second round picks. So
yeah.
Billy's going to need to get that one back somehow.
But, I mean, I think we'll see what they need at that particular point. They do have some prospects that they can deal from. I know there are some untouchables there, you know, the Wallstedt and Z Byam and the like. So you're not going to see those guys move. And I'm really hesitant in trading a guy like Marco Rossi. You know, we can get into him. We've got into him every podcast, it feels like, but I don't think they're going to trade him necessarily in season. So, but they do have guys they can trade, and they have their picks they can trade and at the deadline. So I don't think that's going to really, the first round pick, I guess, is the one carrot a lot of teams like at the deadline, but and they won't have that. But
it's the shiny toy for sure.
Yeah, and they'll have some, you know, and we'll see. In right now, like, I'm not sure they're going to be big game hunting at the deadline, anyways, for where the lineup sits, and if they stay healthy, unless the Brodin injury is serious, right? You know, so you got to be, you got to wonder and worry, and if that's the case, then it's a different scenario. They have more cap space if it's a longer term thing. We don't know that yet. He's seeing doctors and specialists to see where it's at and how long he'll be out. But that'd be the only thing for me if they had end up losing a guy with a big cap hit, a long-term injury reserve, that they would have more cap to work with and hence more of a need.
And real quick, because it's happening live as we record this, if I told you the Minnesota Wild just won over the Vancouver Canucks in overtime and I gave you 50 guesses on who scored the goal, where are you starting?
50 guesses. So, which means it's...
You only need one.
Kirill Kaprizov?
Yeah. And a beautiful feed from one Marco Rossi.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on the Brodin piece, I thought it was actually really interesting today. One Jake Middleton made an appearance on Spittin' Chicklets, and he said, and I quote, "Brodin's back is gone." Doesn't sound like a ringing endorsement for health. Do we have any idea where things are at? 'Cause it's like been a back and forth. It's been a ping pong, and like it sounds like they're deciding, hey, do we like get surgery and keep him out for a couple months, or do we just give him the needle and just inject him and keep him going as long as we can? Like, what are you hearing?
Yeah, it's hard right now. I think that they're still trying to find more information to see, like, usually when that happens, when they try to do more doctor's visits, they're looking for second opinions, or they're looking for different ways for something to be treated, right? If it's a no-brainer, this is a torn ACL, or this is a torn this, or this is a labrum, then things are usually move along pretty quickly. But if it's something that there's kind of a gray area where there's an option to have a rehab without surgery or longer term and do it, they will. You remember Jared Spurgeon last year, he came back and played. Eventually they decided he tried to fight through it, and he even told us, like, he started, like, foot was like numb for, certain moments, and then he decided, hey, I'm not able to help as much as I want to be able to help. So they shut him down and he had surgery. So I'm not saying this is the case with Jonas Brodin at this particular point, but when it's slow trickle of information and it's, they start seeing more doctors and more evaluations are probably looking for, like, what are options for treating this? And is there a chance to do it without having a surgery type thing? So, yeah. I don't know if his back is quote unquote gone kind of thing. I mean, but I just think that, he's a very important player of this team. Usually he's been pretty durable for the most part. I know last year he was banged up too after the hit in Edmonton and stuff. But so I think having clarity on him will give people a better indication of what the Wild can or can't do, or what they need and what need. But Declan Chisholm, one of our early guests on the podcast, has played really well, I think, and stepped in, considering, a guy who was probably thought he'd be regular in the lineup, then he was a 7th D and this and this. This is a great opportunity for him to play a more meaningful role. And he certainly stepped up so far in that case.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what he's playing for, right? Because we just mentioned all these guys in their blue line, and he wasn't one of those 6 guys that I mentioned. Doesn't mean he won't be. Yeah. But, clearly if Zeev Byam is the guy we think he's going to be, like, he'll be part of that blue line next year. So where does that leave? And would Middleton sign for the next 4 years, right? Yeah. And Brodin, as long as he's healthy, will be there. So,
don't worry.
Yeah. So I think this is a really cool opportunity for Declan and to see where he goes.
Yeah. And I mean, I thought I was going the path of Joe Smith Frozen 4 mush, where I was going to be the Minnesota Wild defenseman mush. Kalen Addison was my original son. Things didn't go great. There's plenty of paper trail there for how wrong I was. And I then had my new adoptive son, Declan, and it didn't start great this year. I'm glad, though, that he's finding his footing. And like, I really do think that, granted, Boyum coming in is going to certainly jostle things, like you said, but like, he should absolutely be the power play 1 quarterback for the season, assuming he can continue to play effectively like he has. But I think the skill set's so fit for it. So with Brodin, I'm curious for your thoughts here. 4 Nations, I know that there are like exceptions granted that you can like replace players up until like a day before it starts, I think, if they're injured. Do you almost say that Brodin's on the roster knowing that you have the option to swap him out should he not be healthy? Like, is that the smart move?
Well, like, I mean, I think if Brodin's healthy, he should be on the roster.
I think he absolutely should be on the Swedish roster.
Yeah, like,
some people are saying he shouldn't, and it's weird to me.
I think he should be, and like, again, there's no shame in having him on the roster than if injury replacement and telling the guys that are the 7th defenseman or 6th defenseman, hey, like, if this doesn't work out, like you'll be on it. So, but yeah, like in a ideal world and he's healthy, like I absolutely think that he's a 4 Nations guy on that blue line, which is really good. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you could put him on there, then all of a sudden take him off if you need to, or if them in the Wild discuss and they don't, say, hey, maybe he shouldn't play because he could play, but like he's maybe not healthy enough.
Totally.
Better for the season. Like, this is not the Olympics, right? Like, this is the 4 Nations. If the Olympics, it's probably a different conversation, especially for guys who haven't played in the Olympics yet, right? So
yeah. No, for sure. And so are we thinking that the 3 more or less locks are Joel Eriksson Ek for Sweden and then both Matt Boldy and Brock Faber for Team USA? Do you feel like any of them are at risk?
No, Boldy and Faber are pretty much locks. I think Eriksson Ek will be on there. Gustafsson.
Oh, Gustafsson.
Yeah. For Sweden.
So who are your bubble guys then? Are there any Wild players that you're like, maybe not? Or do you feel like no one else has a shot?
Oh, I'm trying to think of who would be.
I got one. Not a lock by any stretch, but one that I think is at least interesting.
Well, you mentioned previously you wanted Jared Spurgeon on the Team Canada, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's really hot takey. First off, he's not going to be, so
yeah,
it doesn't matter what I want.
So are you saying Fleury on Team Canada?
Fleury on Team Canada.
Yeah.
Hey, at the very least, he's a morale guy.
Yeah.
And it's not like he can't still play.
Yeah.
Like, if he's your 3rd goalie. Now, the real caveat is, like, of their first 2, is it going to be a younger guy? Because right now, I have no clue. To CJ's point when he was on with us earlier in the show, like, you're going to slam down a couple of drinks and just randomly pick which goalies are going in for Canada. I don't know. If one of the 2 is a younger goalie that they think can be part of that, Canadian trail down the road, then I think Fleury should absolutely be, the 3rd goalie, whatever. But if you've got 2 older guys in your 1 and 2 spot, you almost have to bring in a younger guy just to like get him the taste, get him the experience, and groom them along, don't you?
Well, like I've seen Binnington, Aiden Hill, right, on there on projected rosters.
Mm-hmm.
Who else would be?
I've seen like 6 or 7 different goalies.
I'm trying to think of who would be.
So it was Binnington, Hill, Thompson, Decord, which is a really funny one because he technically has 3 different countries he could claim for the Olympics. So I'm not sure how that'll play out. Then Montembeault, then I know there's one more that I'm spacing on right now. But yeah, it's like none of those seem like they're not bad goalies. It's just when you look across at the other 3 teams, there's a big gap.
In goaltending, look at the U.S. goaltending. My God. So
imagine if Russia had a team.
Yeah.
Like three arguably top 5 goalies skill wise.
Yeah.
Like, that's nuts. And
Only one
Canada
net,
just
though.
can't get any.
Only one net though. Yeah. No,
Right.
I mean, I don't know if Flowers on that radar, but like I see the point of having, if you're a third goalie, you're not going to be playing much anyways. But you know, they're very thin at the position as it is, as far as like experience and all that. Even though you have Aiden Hill who won a Stanley Cup, right? So I don't know. I think you're going to see Boldy in favor and Juler, Sinek, Gustafson, potentially Jonas Brodin. So that'd be my selections, I think, for the Wild.
Here we go. If Fleury is not on the team, that just tells us that Crosby has officially passed the torch on to McDavid, and it's McDavid's team now.
Well, which one's supposed to be captain now, right? They both defer to each other, so yeah.
That's so Canadian.
So Minnesota nice.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, anything else you wanted to hit on, Joe, or is that a wrap for us?
I think it's a wrap for us. Yeah, like looking forward to obviously the interview with CJ was great. We have a couple of interviews coming up that'll be really good for Wild fans. But yeah, keep on following along in The Athletic. My colleague Mike Russo's churning out stories day after day. And I'll be back soon for my paternity leave to start working on some more. So it's been a journey. It's been fun. As you know, Scott, every day you have with a little one that's, those days you're going to have to get them back, and there'll be days where they don't want you to hold them or take care of them and everything else. So you have to kind of hold on to that like it's the hourglass kind of going through. And then I just appreciated it. It's been weird to be away from the rink. It's been weird to not cover games. Like I will say that every day, but to have this time with my son and my family, like it's been incredible. And, I'm a bird forever. So it's hard to, there'll still be 40 plus games left when I get back, and the Wild hope a lot more than that in the playoffs. So
yeah, no, crazy times. And maybe like a couple months from now, maybe like during the break for Four Nations, that'll be like the perfect timing to have Middleton jump on with us. He'll be like 3 months into fatherhood, and we can just have a little therapy session for the three of us. Mm-hmm. Is Russo going to be bored when you come back? Because he's just like back in full form of like, yeah, I'm just doing this nonstop.
I'm hopefully he takes a little bit of a break, but knowing him,
the way you even said that means he's not going to.
It's hard to. I mean, the guy's relentless and one of the best in the business for a reason. And I, obviously appreciate him going back to his old days of the one-man show. So hopefully I can continue to add to what we built here. But yeah, it's hopefully he gets a few body maintenance days as I return.
There you have it. Well, appreciate everyone tuning in. As always, if you're new to the show, appreciate whether you subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, 5-star review. If you want video, check us out on the Soda Pod YouTube channel. But otherwise, we'll see you guys here next week. Appreciate you tuning in this week. You stay classy, stay to hockey.